Hello, everyone. Hope everybody's doing good today. Welcome to our latest CE Pro presentation. What are your core beliefs? To start off with here, I'm going to go through a couple of housekeeping slides to make sure everybody is able to participate, both listening and being able to ask questions. The audio portion of the webcast is broadcast over the internet, so make sure your computer's audio is available, unmuted, and the volume is turned up to an acceptable level. If you are having any trouble receiving the audio, please select the question mark in the upper corner of the TalkPoint interface and select Test My System Now. This will give you information on your connection and how to remedy any problems you may have. Often just simply disconnecting and rejoining the event will allow you to catch a better stream of the audio if you do happen to experience any audio problems. As we go through, I'm hoping, I cover everything, but also I hope to have this interactive. So please, whatever questions you come up with, I encourage asking them. I will generally wait till the end of the presentation to ask the questions, but it's very easy to submit them. On the left side of your screen, there's a box labeled Ask a Question, where you can enter your questions. Questions related to the topic will be held, and I'll answer them during a Q&A session at the end. Any questions related to technical issues can also be entered here, and they'll be answered immediately by the webcast producers. All right. Now that we've got that out of the way, let me introduce myself. My name is Nathan Holmes. I am the technical trainer for a company called Access Networks. I have over 20 years experience in the custom residential audio-video industry. I was an Access Networks dealer starting in 2007. I was actually their second dealer. I am a CDS certified networking specialist, CDS certified instructor. I'm a member of the CDS Tech Council. I'm also Ruckus Wireless Wise certified and continually adding more as they come along. Access Networks, if you're unfamiliar with us, we provide industry-leading, enterprise-grade networking solutions for the modern home. We provide custom network design and support, and our certified IT team has backgrounds in both the IT and the AV industry, which allows us to have support which is really specialized to the residential channel and the unique obstacles we face here. Today we're going to talk about what are your core beliefs. And I started it off with something that's basically saying, look, profit is not and should never be a four-letter word. Becoming systemic and repetitive, we all know is essential to increasing our profitability and reliability in business, along with ensuring that we can produce systems and experiences for our customers that they expect. We want to meet or exceed their expectations. And at the core of it all, networking lends itself very well to the concept of modularization and creating repetitive processes and solutions. These enable your company to provide systems and experiences that are, highly stable, extremely efficient, and reliable, and therefore really produce profitability for us, because at the end of the day, that's what we're in business to do, is make money and be profitable. To talk about these different things today, we're going to start off with, start with the core. How to streamline your network deployment. What does that take, and what's going to involve? And then I'm going to discuss how creating this repetitive network deployment process can increase your profitability and success. And it does so in a lot of areas. As you continue to do this better and better in your company, each of these areas can be strengthened, and each adds to an overall increase in profitability and success. We're going to introduce something called Ruckus ICX, Next Generation Enterprise Grade Switches. They're new to the residential market, have some really unique feature sets, and I think are really worth taking a look by any residential dealer. And then we're going to finish up talking about our latest custom network solutions, Access Networks Core2 and Core3, which are based on the Ruckus product line. So let's dive in. When we start talking about how to streamline our network deployment, really the first thing we have to talk about is who are we creating a network for? What are the needs of this person, this client, this situation? So we develop a thorough client needs analysis. Once you've taken all that information in, then you want to standardize how that process takes that information and applies it to designing the appropriate network for your customer. You want to ensure that you also incorporate all the proper RF design characteristics, because it's not just the hardwired Ethernet side of the network, it's the whole experience, and Wi-Fi has its own considerations that have to be considered. Next, we're going to talk about the concept of do the same thing every time. Don't recreate the wheel. Try to do the same thing every time, and you can definitely do that with the right product selections and the right approach. We're also going to talk about outsourcing. What is it, and why do I need it, or why should I consider it? And I hammer on this in every presentation I do, but end of the day, proper documentation is key to your success. From the beginning to the end, document, document, document. When you do this, your designs are appropriate for what the client needs are. Your deployment has everything to run efficiently and be deployed. And long-term support has all of the information to reference back to on a day in and day out basis, so you're not searching for things. You know, it really is all the way through the process of every project. Documentation is key. And you want to start really from the beginning. When you start asking the right questions from your client, one, it ensures the network design is going to be appropriate for their application, but also as you start, asking more and more of these questions, the client starts to understand how important a network is to their life. If you just go, oh, all right, you got some iPhones, you got some things, okay, I know what networking to use. That's one thing. If you start asking a client 10, 15, 20, 30 questions about what type of devices, how do they use it, how do they live their lives, we're going to kind of go into this, but you can see how it will change their perception. And when you start submitting bids and proposals to them, they immediately understand that you've taken the time to really understand them and their situation, so what you're giving them is specific for them. When you evaluate your client needs, one of the first things you want to talk about, who's going to be using the network? Is it mainly kids? Is it elderly people? Is it a family? Is it a single person? Depending on who uses the LAN will define a lot of the characteristics of what it needs to have. Additionally, how is it going to be used? Are we talking, I got a day trader who needs to be up 100% of the time, or you know what, we do a little bit of light surfing here and there, or we've got kids with gaming systems and super low latency control systems, things like that. Well, that's going to be a different set of hardware. Additionally, what devices will your client use? I mean, each device has different characteristics, and if you don't provide the right product for those devices, it will diminish the experience. Doesn't mean they can't connect, but they definitely won't connect the way they should. Also, you need to find out how fast your client's ISP is going to be. If they're dealing with a 10 or 20 meg connection, a lot of things will be, appropriate. But if you're dealing with a client who's got, gigabit connectivity, which many homes do nowadays, you need to ensure that you use product that can help that client really capitalize on the ISP speed that they're receiving. And you need to go through basic wireless design questions. They're going to be, what's this house made out of? What's the, or what devices are going to be used? How are you going to be doing a lot of wireless streaming? Are there mirrors? What are the interference? All the other little things that happen. There's a lot of ways to determine what's going to happen to the wireless signal to ensure that what you provide and design for them will work and work beyond their expectations. Once we take all that information in, then we want to use a fully comprehensive and standardized design process. On the right, there's an example of a form that we use day in and day out, but any form that you decide is good for your company is a great starting point. You need to talk about what kind of project is it. Is it a 5,000 square foot house on 10 acres of land, or is it a 1,200 square foot condo in the midst of a multi-dwelling unit? Those are going to have a lot of different characteristics, and it's important you know what type of project it is when you're designing the LAN. How big is the building? What construction materials are used? Again, what is their ISP speed, WAN, and how many switch locations are you going to have on the project? Are they going to all be co-located in one area, or are they going to be located around the residence? Just locating switches around a residence can dramatically affect the way a network performs, and require some different characteristics. So you need to know that. And you need to know how many ports are going to be needed beyond what you're designing? You know, how many PoE ports do they need? Do they need to be PoE, PoE plus, PoH? You know, you need to design the network to support the products that are going to be on there, and make sure you always leave, you know, at least a 20% overlap of extra ports to use in the future. Additionally, are they using streaming devices, you know, heavy streaming, doing voice over IP? All these different things are going to determine how much latency is on the network. And when you figure out all of these characteristics, you can design the right network for the right needs of that, you know, customer. Once you've got the backbone designed, now we need to talk about proper RF design. And this is one of those things that I think people try to they miss the boat on this. They start going, oh, you just need 5 access points, or yeah, you know, they're this much. RF design is really straightforward, but it has some characteristics you have to consider. I call them the 3 C's of wireless network design: coverage, capacity, and clients. These are all critical to determining what the appropriate access point is for your project. Coverage is pretty straightforward. There should never be a design in today's day and age that isn't designed for 5 gigahertz coverage. 802.11ac is the standard right now, and you need to design for 5 gig coverage. This is pretty simple. RF signal propagates over a distance from the access point, and signal decreases, so you want to be within 25 feet of an access point. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. It means that you've got a 1,900 square foot footprint for a single access point to give you good 5 gig coverage. If you're going to put multiple access points in, now you can go down to 1,500 square feet. If you're going to use, you know, if you've got a lot of, say, mirrors or difficult construction materials, you may drop that down to 12 or 1,300. And if you're going to use wider channels like 80 meg, things like that, you probably want to go down to 1,200, maybe even 1,100 square feet per access point based on what you're going to design for. But it's still really straightforward. If the house is 6,000 square feet, you're going to have 4 to 5 access points. There you go. Design your coverage based on square footage. Next, capacity. Are you doing 1 or 2 clients, or is this a family of 4? You know, just because mom and dad had a Corvette when they were single, with a family of 4, it can't be the family car anymore because it can't handle the capacity. Same thing with access points. Your design has to include the total number of client devices that are connected to the access point and trying to authenticate to the access point. Anytime you've got a device that can see that SSID that's not connected, it's going to try to connect. And if your access point can't handle a high number of clients, it's just going to crush the access point, and even the clients that are connected won't be able to communicate. So you've got to consider how many clients is your access point capable of communicating with concurrently. And when it gets to clients, let's face it, Apple devices have certain discovery protocols and things that are different than Windows. Then, say you've got single antenna devices or dual antenna client devices, or I've got 3 antenna high performance devices. These are going to dictate, which type of access points you use. If I've got a 3 antenna client device, then the minimum access point I'm going to use is a 3 antenna access point because I want my client to have the full experience. Additionally, are we embracing the newer technologies in 802.11ac Wave 2, where we've got multi-user MIMO and all these things? So you have to know what client devices are going to use the network so you use the right access points for those clients. All right. That kind of gets you through the RF design, but I want to reemphasize something. Do the same thing every time. This means using the same hardware and software, which leads to technician familiarity, and it's going to produce a lot more efficient deployments and troubleshooting. You want to standardize on an IP scheme that works, primarily for both flat and multi-VLAN designs. With small changes, you can have these defined and reuse over and over for your company. Additionally, standardize on a single type of VPN or remote access solution. You don't want your guys having to, go, which VPN was that? Okay, this client, that. Standardize on this. Make sure that it's the same way of monitoring the project, so it's easy for your technicians to diagnose issues and or connect. Efficiency leads to profitability. And choose product lines that are going to scale with your projects. You don't want to have to change product lines just because the project scaled to a different size. I mean, there are extremes to both sides of that, obviously, but with the right product selection, you can dramatically minimize how many different product lines your company needs to use to hit all of your projects. The last thing I want to talk about when we talk about streamlining is something called outsourcing. You know, the strongest companies out there know that having reliable partners that they can depend on to outsource portions of their workload to knows that they can have the highest level of experience for their clients. It doesn't matter, I mean, whether or not it's an employee that's on the books or if it's an outsourced company, as long as their client gets the highest level of experience, that's what matters to them. So outsourcing, especially in the IT world, can be a great thing to utilize. You get purpose-dedicated and higher-trained personnel. I mean, in the AV industry, we've got to handle so many different, types of products and categories of products that getting somebody trained in everything is nearly impossible, and it's extremely expensive to do so. By outsourcing certain characteristics, you can get people that have already been not only heavily trained in those products, but are very versed in it, so they're much more efficient. This can decrease your deployment times and lead to something called fixed profitability. That's what we're all here for, profit. And one of the things that you'll find with outsourced companies is they tend to use only the best performing product lines, and they've taken the time to fully vet these product lines, meaning they've tested them in designs similar to what their customers are going to use, so they know exactly how they perform. And they've designed, specific configurations and settings that are optimized for those environments, those projects, so that we can ensure that, again, not only is the client experience better than it could be without using them, but it's just efficient and it makes the company overall seem stronger. So keep in mind, outsourcing is definitely a way to add, and increase the speed and decrease the amount of problems in your deployments, which, again, your clients love, and it also leads to long-term stability, which in the end, all we want to do is meet or exceed expectations, and outsourced companies, they know that they're only as good as the last project they've done for you. So every single project they have, it's key for them to meet or exceed your expectations, which allows you to do the same thing for your clients. So outsourcing, I think, is something good to consider. Now, past that, those are the tools that you have at your disposal to do these things. But how do each of them really increase our profit and success? Well, let's look at them. Let's take some time to look at how product selection can help you form a better repetitive process that can scale. We're going to discuss a little more and deeply IP address standardization and standardized config files. Why do they make it easy for deployment? And what is this thing, technician familiarity? How does this make us more efficient? And as always, I'm going to reemphasize document, document, document. So when we talk about product selection for repetition and scale, we think about this. I mean, if you start doing a design and then the client comes back and says, oh, wait, we need to add this. Oh, we're thinking about adding this. If you use a product line that's only suited for a small portion of what you do, now you've got to go back to the whole design process and redesign the whole network. And once you do that, you may end up with a design that's out there that's only a one-off. And that's going to dramatically increase not only design times, deployment times, but your troubleshooting times. And that is the portion that's going to dramatically decrease your profit and could potentially destroy your client confidence, which, let me tell you, client confidence is one of the hardest things to gain back once you lose it. You've got to maintain it from the beginning. So when you select a product line that can scale. That way you can maintain consistency in your configurations. You don't want to have to go, oh, you know what, now that we're using this product from this company, we have to change all the programming, or we have to do this, we have to change all that. Try to find product lines that can grow with your project and your customers so that you're efficient, stable, and you don't have to rethink and recreate the wheel every single time. Fewer product lines ensure that technicians have a lot more familiarity with each project or product. So when they experience things that are out of the norm, they immediately know what's out of the norm because they know exactly how this product is supposed to work. And if it's working in a way that's different, hey, immediately they know that and can start to troubleshoot it. And because they know the product, when they start to troubleshoot, they know immediately where to go to and how to find it. And if you start swapping in different product lines here and there, you don't get that. You lose all of that efficiency and benefit. So be very cautious with doing that and try to maintain fewer product lines. Additionally, when you have higher sales with fewer manufacturers, it leads to increased margin on those products and buying power. So all in all, you can see how it strengthens your company in a lot of different ways. IP address standardization, this is something that I've pushed for many, many years and implemented in the companies that I've ran. Similar devices should always use the same IP address or range of addresses. I took a brief snapshot and put on the right side here showing that on this particular configuration, all of the power devices are between 192.168.19.190 to 192. So if I'm doing any type of a IP scan and I see a device at a .196 or .197, I am in my head immediately know that should be a power device. And if it's not, there's something wrong going on here. And if I know I'm looking for a power device, I know approximately what its IP address is, even if I don't have the list in front of me. Additionally, when my technicians are configuring systems and getting ready for deployments, they know immediately, look, all power devices are going to be here, all my control devices are going to go here, my Crestron processor was always at .200, things like that. So we standardized on that, so it allowed you to not only decrease your deployment times, but really decrease troubleshooting times because you knew where things should be. And it's not just developing in your head. You have to really take the time to define these processes and create them as procedures in your company. This allows for a few different things. One, it decreases the time it takes to train new employees because they can always go back and reference the documentation you've given them. But it also encourages other employees to learn different things that they don't know because they don't have to take time from somebody else to lead them into something. They have all the documentation to go to, so they can strengthen their own knowledge. So you get better cross-training of your existing employees. There's a lot of ways that this helps in every facet. So IP address standardization, I think, is very important. Standardized configuration files provide a whole different level of benefit. This is where I think a lot of companies fail. They try to custom design the configuration for every single project when, okay, there's a little bit that gets custom tailored to each client, but 90% or more can be things that are programmed once, tested over and over again to provide reliability, and they're kind of modular that you drop in. Because end of the day, the performance of great hardware and the reliability of great hardware still rests on the quality of its configuration and programming. It doesn't matter how great the hardware is. If the programming is crap, the experience is going to be crap. You've got to make sure that you use good programming, and the only way to do that efficiently and profitably is to standardize. Use different configuration schemes and program schemes that you've vetted and ensured that they work over and over. You test them and test them and test them. And then have defined different types of configurations or schemes for different types of LANs. Okay, when we have multiple VLANs, we need to do this. When we have flat networks, we need to do this. When we have these products in here, we need to definitely go to multiple VLANs. Things like that. And document this. Hey, when we have this many IP cameras and we have this many streaming devices, we absolutely go to multiple VLANs. Or hey, when we have these particular devices, client devices, we have to use minimum of 3x3 access points or more. And you know what? We've got Apple devices, so we're going to have to make sure we have these discovery protocols identified. All these different types of things can be documented, and therefore make it much easier to, again, train people, but make sure that they're implemented and make checklists. I mean, having a checklist that says, was this done? Yes, 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 ensures you don't forget things. And it makes it very easy to recreate over and over again. Additionally, when you really get into that, there's two schools of thought here. When you start looking at network switches, let's face it, web-based interfaces are kind of cool. They're graphic, they're pretty, and they're easier to navigate. But unfortunately, they're also designed from one person's perspective, and you have to think like they do to understand where you go. And if you're trying to create repetitive and repeatable processes, then what you have to do is you have to literally document a step-by-step process. Go to this selection, tap this to select this, select this, select this. And you have to do that on every single step of the way to make sure that it's recreatable. And it works, it's just not as efficient as something called CLI. Command line interfaces are really in the root and the core of devices, and products that allow you to use CLI are usually much more feature rich. They give you a lot better visibility, and they're designed to allow you to create configurations that you can upload, basically a bulk upload a whole configuration. This means that when you're troubleshooting, you can go to specific areas and problems and find them quicker, not have to go through, well, it might be in this area and go through. So from a deployment to a troubleshooting to repetitiveness, CLI type products absolutely give you a benefit over web-based GUIs. You can use both. And there are times that having a device that has both really increases the overall visibility and the things that you can do with it. But just keep in mind that there are two different selections, and one was definitely designed for repetitive and higher end programming. Okay. The next thing is that we talked about this a little bit, technician familiarity. When you focus on a limited number of brands, your employees become much more familiar with how that product line is expected to perform. It leads to decreased deployment times, more rapid troubleshooting, And look, I've kind of hammered on a little bit, but the fewer brands you specify, the more familiar each technician is with the nuances, and how it's a lot easier for them to just deploy over and over and over again. And you don't have to be concerned of whether or not you're going to hit the timelines of deployment that you expect, because they're not having to teach themselves each time or relearn things. So it definitely produces efficiency and profitability. Again, I'm going to hammer it, document, document, document. Document your standardized IP schemes. Define your standard addressing used for networking hardware. Your hardware that you're putting in. Most high-end networking gear, each of the devices has its own IP address associated with it. Standardize that so you know where to find all your infrastructure hardware. Define thresholds in your design process. When you're going to go to different types of networks. When do I go to multiple VLAN? When do I need redundancy? When do I go to 10 gig? When do I go to 40 gig? What are these different situations that push me up to these different design parameters, and define them so you can have an easily referenced design process. And define what your configurations are. Use this module for this, use this for this, use this scheme for this, so that you can easily train new employees and also ensure that everything being put out is done repetitively and at the same level. And ensure that the way that they're applied is well documented, so that if for some reason your highest level, programmer or technician happens to be on a honeymoon or just out of the office or unavailable, you want one of your junior or mid-level people to still be able to work their way through it and have something to reference so that they can get through it and make sure that you as a company have the same appearance to your customer. So that's all based on documentation and easily referencing those things for your employees. All right, so that's the overall process, and I think you can see by taking some time to define how you approach building networks, define how you configure them and deploy them, and decreasing the number of product lines you have, you can really be efficient and profitable. I want to talk about the Ruckus ICX product line because I think it really embodies everything that we've talked about, and it's fairly new to the residential market. And it does some things that are unique compared to other enterprise-grade solutions. So we're going to talk a little bit about the way enterprise-grade hardware worked in the past and how it does now and how Ruckus embraced that. We're going to talk about something called license upgrading rather than hardware upgrading. And we'll talk about some of the advantages of being able to scale your projects, and then a term called stacking. It's common in the IT world, but a lot of people in the residential world don't know what it is or if they need it or what does it provide. So I thought we'd talk about it a little bit because ICX does it in a much more modern and new way, and it's really has some unique benefits. So when we look at LAN installations, smaller installations that only have a small number of devices are usually fine on a flat network, especially when they're not very latency sensitive. I mean, our example here has a couple of network switches and a single access point. That's a really kind of basic network, but it works in a lot of applications. Well, what happens if the LAN requirements grow? Well, in the past, true enterprise-grade hardware was really fairly rigid in its use cases, and system variations typically required selection of very specific models for each application. So, as the LAN requirements grew, let's say we added another access point or another switch, or now we've gone to multiple VLANs because we needed to, because we needed to ensure low latency and things like that. Well, once you get to a system of this size, having a layer 2 core switch isn't appropriate. It's best practice in the IT world to replace your layer 2 core switch with a layer 3 core switch to be able to handle all your inter VLAN routing. Well, that makes sense, and it's absolutely what is best practice and the right way to do it, but it also comes with a cost because you're actually replacing the hardware. And while it worked, it's not necessarily the best way to go. And we're going to talk about the new way we're going to do that. With the Ruckus ICX next generation enterprise-grade switches, it's kind of what they've done. The person who designed the Catalyst-grade switches for Cisco was looking for a little more freedom and wanted to add some things. And Cisco's a fairly rigid company, so he moved on to another company, Brocade, to develop the ICX switch line, which is now part of Ruckus. So basically what he brought with was the stability and the features and everything that had made Cisco Catalyst such a name in the industry as a go-to brand switch line. But then he added some new flexibility to it, which allows us to easily configure them to the residential market and make them much more beneficial for us from not only a cost but a performance standpoint. Your switch variations are going to be in 12, 24, or 48 ports, and they've got PoE, PoE Plus, and PoH standards supported through the switch line. Not all the switches will handle all those, but every one of those are required. I mean, your newest high-end access points that exist out there are requiring more than PoE Plus power. They're going up to PoH power, and very few manufacturers will have a switch that's capable of that. Ruckus ICX is one of them. Additionally, they can support a range of RJ45 ports. They can be 1 gig, 2.5 gig, 10 gig, and your fiber ports can be 1, 10, or even 40 gig. And as much as we think, it's just residential, they don't have that much for networking, the reality is you've got networking, or you've got video over IP solutions designed for the residential market that require 40 gig uplinks between switches. And overall, I've been doing this a very long time, and I can say that the constraints, or the requirements for the network in a lot of residences eclipse many businesses and what they require. I mean, a fully automated high-end residence can tax the network substantially more than most businesses ever will, and have requirements for super, super, super low latency. It's not like you're surfing the web. If you go up to a touch panel and you hit volume up, you need to know that it happens immediately. There's no delay. And the strength of your network is going to be required to make that happen. So it's really important that you use the right products and that they can scale with you. Getting back to that other design where we had, what happens with ICX when the requirement grows? If we take the same example with single core, a couple of extra switches and a single access point, we grow that by the same scale. I don't have to replace the switch. All of the ICX switches are layer 2 and layer 3 capable. And unless you even need some of the advanced layer 3 routing functionality, all you would have to do is change the configuration settings in that core to now be handling all your inter VLAN routing on a layer 3 basis through that switch. And all you've done to upgrade from a flat to VLAN to multiple VLAN scenario was change the configuration settings. This means your client didn't have to replace hardware. How cool is that? It's a much, much more modern approach that makes a lot more sense. License upgrades are substantially lower cost than hardware upgrades and can be added as needed in a variety of levels. For example, An advanced layer, you could just add an advanced layer 3 license today because you need some of the advanced layer 3 routing functionality. And then, well, 18 months from now, let's add 2 10 gig fiber licenses to it, so we can have 10 gig fiber between switches, because now we've added some video over IP and we need higher bandwidth between switches. That's easy. You just add licenses as needed, but the hardware stays the same. And maintaining on-premise hardware will absolutely minimize client disruption. This keeps the cost of ownership much, much lower, and it promotes more rapid upgrades. I mean, if you go to your client and say, yeah, you know, we got to go to multiple VLANs to get rid of this latency we're seeing, but it's going to cost you $10,000 in a new switch and all these things, they're like, well, I guess we'll deal with a little bit of the laggingness right now. If you go to a customer and say, you know what, all we got to do is, you know, change the configuration programming up, we're up and running for, you know, a couple grand, now they're like, oh, let's do it, let's do it. So they stay more current, and they know that you're really looking out for them in the long run, you know, because you've from the beginning specified product that can grow with them, which is an advantage of scale. You know, this configuration, which is, you know, a basic flat network to a multiple VLAN scenario like we said before, those are the same switches. You're just dealing with a different amount of port quantity and then configuring them. So that means that you don't have to replace gear. It can just really grow with your client. And I think that's one of the big things that will, you know, increase your client confidence and definitely lead to, you know, long-term client happiness and them wanting to continue business with you because they know you've taken care of them not just today, but in the long run. And that brings us to another feature set. There's something called stacking. What is it, and why? When we hear about it, you know, off and on. What stacking is a concept of, let's say, you know, what do you do when you've got more than 48 ports in a particular area? You know, we all know that we have to program each switch differently and each one separate, and you've got to do all this communication between them. Well, stacking allows you to take multiple stacking capable switches and have them operate as a single group or a stack of switches. And they show all the characteristics of a single switch, but with a whole bunch more ports. You end up with a single network management interface, which means from network administration perspective, it's really easy. You only got to go to one IP address and you can see every port on all the switches because virtually it's looked at as one switch, which dramatically simplifies the setup and operation of the network. And it also allows a lot of benefits when it comes to how traffic is routed and controlled between switches, because instead of having to have one switch define everything for all the others, virtually they're looked at as one switch. So it manages traffic a lot better, and there's really a whole lot of benefits if your project needs it. Especially some video over IP solutions and things like that, it really does change how network traffic will occur in a very positive way. In the past, though, in your older stacking configurations, all of those switches had to be located in the same location. And yeah, it gave you increased port count and a single management interface, but you had to use these really, really expensive high bandwidth connectors. I'm talking thousands of dollars for what are essentially cables running between switches. And it worked. It gave you that, you know, single interface, which over time made the money back for the homeowner for the, you know, particular network deployment, but it was still really expensive and you had to have everything run to one location. The modern way of doing that is to allow your switches to be located in multiple locations and just use low-cost fiber optic connections for unification. I mean, taking a typical 10 gig fiber connection, which is really inexpensive in the scheme of things, allows us to have all of these switches in a stack configuration, even though they're not located in the same area. So for this project, even though they're all over the house, in the pool house, the game room, the main equipment location, I have one management interface I need to go to manage all the switches across the entire project. It's a really neat feature on something that ICX added and brought to the table that I think will benefit the residential industry in a lot of ways when properly deployed. So that was kind of a brief introduction to the ICX. We can have absolutely anybody who's interested afterwards, you know, long term, we can get into deeper on it. But I want to talk about how we took those features and the things available with the ICX line and added those into our custom program solutions. One of the big things that we found at our company, and I've done over, you know, the last 13 years, is we have custom outsourced LAN solutions, and the new versions of those are Core 2 and Core 3. Core 2 are flat, Core 3 are for multiple VLANs. We've also been identified as providing the industry's best support, which is a really a unique honor for us, and we were really appreciative of that. Because we try to make things that are plug and play, but let's face it, there's going to be different things that happen and come up that are unique, and our support team helps you through those. Overall, our solutions are very scalable and repeatable, and in the end, we're going to talk about some of the support advantages that we have associated with that. In our Core 2 and Core 3 systems, what they are is they're enterprise-grade network solutions that are custom and specifically designed for the automated residents. We take that design process we talked about where we ask all those questions, and we create these plug-and-play, ready-to-deploy networks that give us full visibility. Additionally, we have what's called live monitoring, which is our industry-leading engineers monitoring the network health. Now, it's not just necessarily monitoring a device, it's monitoring the health of the network to ensure that the network is operating optimally. Does it need a flu shot? And by leveraging the power of Ruckus Wireless and the ICX product lines, along with configuration settings that we've developed over the past 13 years, our solutions really do provide the highest stability and inherently repeatable plus scalable network solutions that are available. When I was an integrator, we used Access Networks for a couple projects, and we really found that it was so efficient and profitable for us that we standardized on it across our network offerings because it wasn't that we weren't capable. It just allowed us to be so much more efficient, and it made our clients that much more confident in us that we used it as a standard, and it was really good for us. Additionally, like I said, our industry best support, our dedicated support engineers, they're certified in IT, which they need to be, but they also are so familiar with the residential channel that they can really help pinpoint issues better than somebody who, look, if you call into most switch manufacturers, you're going to get a guy who talks about, this citywide deployment or this enterprise this, not somebody who understands residential, and that's what our team is entirely focused on. Additionally, our standardized design process really will produce for you a fixed cost, fully engineered LAN solution that's specifically configured for what your project needs. It's not just, hey, yeah, we're going to put a 24 port and a 48 port in, we should be good with that. No. We know, because we've asked you to provide to us the exact products that are going to utilize this LAN, and therefore designed it to make sure that those products perform optimally. Additionally, we include documentation from pre-sale engineering to network infrastructure as-built to the system settings and credentials documentation, so you can reference it at deployment and in the future when you need to. Again, documentation is key, so we supply that for you. And once you do deploy a system, look, we almost always need support with little things in the field, with things we don't know. Most likely, if you call into our support, you're going to talk to the same engineer who probably programmed that system specifically for you, so they know it inside and out. That means you're going to be in and out with any issues you have really quickly with a lot more efficiency, and frankly, it's one of the reasons you're using an outsourced company is to provide that level for you. The Core 2 and 3 systems are pre-configured based, like we said, on your requested settings. So you give us the IP scheme, you give us the SSIDs and all those things, but overall, they all include a Cisco router firewall, a wireless controller, one ICX primary switch, which we'll talk about based on the port quantities you need, a Helix live monitoring device, and included with that is 1 year of our live monitoring service where our support engineers are actively involved with ensuring you have proactive support on the network. And it's completely repeatable. So here's an example using a 12-port switch or a 24-port switch or a 48-port switch. All three examples are a different starting point based on what you need, but it's still repeatable. Same type of programming, here you go. And, well, you know what, I need to add an extra 12-port switch. Okay, that's easy enough. You can add it to any three of them. Oh, wait, you know what, we just added another building to property. Let's add another one. Yeah, okay, we can do that. Or a 24 or 48. Whatever you need to add, you do that. And it's all, the ICX switch line is very interchangeable. If you need to go from a 12 to a 24 or so on, the programming is standard. So it's very quick and easy to do. And then do you need to add entry level, mid, or best-of-class access points? Do you need to add outdoor access points? Whatever your project requirements are based on the clients and the capacity, we can do that. And then at the end, you come up with a tailored configuration that's specific for your project that we give you a fixed cost quote on. You're then going to tell us how you want it programmed from an IP scheme and an SSID, and it will arrive ready to deploy. Literally, as soon as you plug it in, it's operational. That means it's fully scalable as well, because with the Ruckus ICX line, again, we don't have to change hardware. So if you start off with a flat network and it's fine, it's going great, and the client goes, hey, we just added 32 IP cameras. Whoop, all right, we're going to multi-VLAN. Easy enough to do. We don't have to change the hardware. All we got to do is upgrade from a Core 2 to Core 3 in programming. It's just additional programming. We might need additional licenses based on what they, certain applications, but for the most part, it's just an upgrade of programming. And add another switch. Makes it very simple. And with the wide range of Access Networks access points, which are powered by Ruckus and utilized in the Core 2 or Core 3 systems, you ensure that you've got the same Wi-Fi performance for any environment based on how much interference or construction materials. So you can see they're really scalable on both the hardwired side and the wireless side based on the needs of the project. And you're not changing hardware, you're just changing licensing or configurations, which is substantially cheaper. The advantages of our support team usually has less than 1 minute wait times on support calls. And like I said, our engineers definitely understand the residential market. All Core 2 and 3 systems come with 4 years of hardware warranty and standard technical support, as well as, like we said, the Helix with this Access Networks live monitoring included for the first year. Now, this provides emergency after-hour support with proactive monitoring and triage provided by Access Networks. Again, whatever you allow us to do. You may have a client that doesn't want anything, accessed remotely. That's fine. We can still notify you that there's an issue, and then you can approach it. Comes with business day, next business day advanced hardware replacement for all Access Networks products as well. So you can see it's really a comprehensive solution designed to ensure that when you use us to outsource for your network, it literally goes in, works, and we support it as if you had built it from the ground up, but with staff that are so versed in that product and the IT world that they can do it at the highest level. To summarize, we talked about how important it is to streamline your network deployment and how, also repeating your network deployment process can increase your profitability and overall your success. We talked about the Ruckus next generation enterprise-grade switches and why they're uniquely suited for the residential market. And eventually, and then we did talk about our Core 2 and Core 3 systems. We will be shipping those starting on December 11th. So look for those coming out soon, and I look forward to everybody trying them. That's it for my presentation, but what I would like to do is dive into a couple of the questions we have here. So let's start with this. Somebody had asked, what is POH? The IEEE defines different standards. 802.3 AF was PoE, 802.3 AT was PoE plus, and POH it was developed for HD-based T transmissions. Basically, PoE will supply up to about 15.4 watts. PoE plus will do, call it 30, and then POH can go up to 60 watts. There's actually other standards that can go up to higher than that, but it's the amount of power that are put out. And for example, the new Ruckus R720 access point, which is a 4x4x4 multi-user MIMO access point. Not only does it require POH power to perform in full mode, but it also has a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, so you can fully maximize on the 802.11 AC standard. Well, that's what POH is. Yes, the question was asked, are all of the ports on the ICX switch line front-facing? Yes, they are. As much as people in the residential channel go, oh my gosh, I want rear-facing ports and I want this, end of the day, anything that's designed for enterprise is designed on a premise that all infrastructure wiring needs to be installed once and terminated once, and then use patch cables to go from here to there. Therefore, they use patch panels that are forward-facing, switches that are forward-facing, things like that. in the residential channel. I've done many installations where we've rear face switches, on the back of the racks, and then utilized the space behind them for other accessories. Just takes proper rack design, but you can definitely use them and be very effective with them. Somebody asked, real quick, which of the new switches support POH? The only switch that supports POH is the 7150-48ZP. It has 16 ports of POH and 16 ports of 2.5 gigabit Ethernet as well. It has dual power supply, so you can do up to 740 watts of power on the whole switch. Are the ICX switches going to be available for sale as standalone product, or you'll be requiring to? No, we will be distributing the ICX line in our distribution channel as well. There will be two different levels. One level where we will provide programming support on flat network deployments, and one where if you already, once you are versed with the product and are familiar with it, you can just buy it without support and continue it on your own. So we will not be providing support for multiple VLAN through distribution. And frankly, when you get into doing enterprise-grade switches, I recommend either one, hiring somebody that knows it inside and out, or utilizing a company such as ourselves or others to provide the support needed for a multiple VLAN environment. There was a question early on about what makes these switches any better than Cisco or Netgear switches. Again, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I think I've pinpointed that, from an enterprise-grade product, it's true enterprise-grade product from the power supplies being used, the form factors, the power output, the programming capabilities, the feature sets. That alone are going to be better than most of the Netgear switches. And again, when you're talking Cisco, you've got multiple different product lines. I don't necessarily think that you have to go away from any other product line. I think it's key that you use, like we said, products that are scalable, can use what you're going to do. The ICX switches with their multi-location stacking are absolutely different than Cisco and provide a feature set that they can't. The Netgear switches are more prosumer than enterprise grade, so they're a different level of switch. It's not that it's bad. There's certain, a lot of applications those will be good with, but for somebody looking for a true enterprise grade switch, this is hands down a much better switch. Someone else asked, is AVB supported? Currently, AVB is not. AVB, unfortunately, is although the standard has been adopted in the audio switching, matrix switching by Savant and a couple other manufacturers, it's a unique part of the standard that almost no switch manufacturers have embraced or have considered it viable. We have started talking with the Ruckus engineers, and they, in the past, have been extremely open about adding feature sets based on our recommendations. Whether they will or won't, we'll have to see. I would say they probably may, but I think it'll also depend on how many products in the field embrace that. Anybody who's using a particular application that's using that needs an AVB switch to handle matrix switching, that switch by itself can be used standalone to be able to provide that for that product while still using ICX to do any of the others. Basically, you're just using that one switch then to handle the matrix side of what you're doing. So there's ways to do it. Unfortunately, guys, we're running out of time. I will reply to any of the other questions that we have asked I'll follow up in an email to each person. And I really do appreciate and thank everyone for joining us today. The presentation will be available online within 24 hours. And thank you.